I want to say a couple different things about this fund. And so the first thing is, at a high level, this is a fund that's supporting communities all across this country, and it's the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. It's incredibly important when we look at, in Ontario and in Cobourg, just the challenges of flood risks and erosion to our shoreline. And I can say I'm the newly minted Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, but since 2015 I've been the Member of Parliament for Beaches East York and the East End of Toronto, and the entire south end of my riding is waterfront. And waterfront communities, we know very well just the importance of our shoreline. It's important to tourism in our communities. It's important to ensure the protection of our homes. And so this fund is vital for all sorts of reasons, but it's incredibly vital to protect the shoreline, including here Monk's Cove seawall and here in the harbour. The second thing I want to say, though, is just about the importance of partnership. And being in this role for a short time, I've already seen when we want to get things done, we're most effective in getting things done together. And you have here in Mayor Cleveland and in your CEO, Tracy, and I know there are other councils here as well. And I just want to say thanks for the partnership. None of this happens if we're not there at the table together. And this federal government has a history, since I've been there since 2015, of working hand in hand with communities. And this is a very good example of that. The last thing I just want to say, today is a difficult day. The mayor is saying he's heading down to Washington shortly with team around the Great Lakes, and this is a challenging time for Canadians when you look at the long-standing friend and ally that in the course of one election has changed course entirely and has seen us in a combative way and is posing a threat to our economy and to the success and prosperity in this country. And we are going to fight tooth and nail as a federal government. You heard the Prime Minister speak this morning about the importance of a Team Canada response, and premiers across the country are united in working with the Prime Minister, and you're going to continue to see that really forceful response. I also want to say, though, the importance of infrastructure spending here at home. You'll hear, and it's unquestionably the right message, but it is time to build. We need to make sure we're building up our communities. When we see threats from abroad, the best thing we can do is make sure we're strong here at home, and that means building up our communities. And ultimately, in many ways, that comes down to infrastructure. And you can see it as supporting communities in the short term with stimulus spending and job creation, but this is a perfect example. It is that kind of stimulus, but it's also, we're going to wake up years from now and it will have had a long-term sustainable impact on this community in a really positive way. And so, I look forward to continued partnership. I hope I get to be back in Cobourg, and so far I've been the Minister of Good News. I hope it stays that way, and I look forward to continued partnership and being new on this file. So much of this is about building relationships, and so I look forward to continue to build on this relationship and see what more we can get done in the months and years ahead.
Thank you, Minister. I mean, what an honor it is to be hosting the Federal Minister of Housing and Infrastructure and Communities here in Cobourg for the first time. I'm joined, of course, by our council members, as well as the senior executive and, of course, the Northumberland media crew. I'm thrilled to be part of this historic announcement for Cobourg. I remember that throughout the campaign 2 years ago, one of the most consistent questions we received from residents is, what is council going to do to protect and repair our harbour? You see, the harbour and Monk's Cove area are two of our most cherished landmarks here in Cobourg. They are a place where our residents go to sit and reflect as they appreciate nature, where generations have learned to sail, and where we have greeted guests to our community for over 100 years. Once a major shipping port, Cobourg's historic harbour led to the growth and vitality of our community. Thanks to the courageous efforts of our previous councils, Cobourg saw the transformation of our harbour from a shipping port to a stunning tourist destination. With that, we have been able to tap into new economic opportunities that continue to support our vibrant economy and our local businesses. Now, the impact of rising water levels in Lake Ontario, intensified by climate change, poses a significant challenge to the town of Cobourg's waterfront infrastructure. The Monk's Cove seawall and the harbour's breakwaters are currently compromised, leading to erosion and structural weaknesses. These rising water levels allow larger, more powerful waves to reach and damage our shoreline, necessitating adaptive infrastructure solutions to protect our community. Currently, I have the honor and the privilege to serve as the national co-chair of the Mayor's Commission on Economic Transformation for the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. This important advocacy group, of which Cobourg was a founding member dating back to 2010, now represents over 280 member municipalities along the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River Basin. Standing alongside mayors of Montreal, Hamilton, Chicago, and Milwaukee, along with our Indigenous partners on both sides of the border, I remain heavily vested in advocating the organization's strategic priorities of water equity, shoreline protection, the prevention of urban flooding, all while focusing on sustainable economic opportunities across North America's greatest natural resource. I always find it an interesting fact that if you take the GDP of all the communities around the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Basin and you add them together, it would make up the third largest GDP behind only China and the US. You see, the protection and the sustainable development of the North America's greatest natural resource will only be possible through collaboration, as we're seeing here today, as well as collaboration between USA, Canada, and our Indigenous partners. I'm looking forward to heading to Washington, as was mentioned, tomorrow morning on behalf of this pivotal organization to bring these messages of collaboration, environmental stewardship, and economic opportunities to both Capitol Hill and the White House. Locally, Cobourg remains committed on taking on major planning projects that protect our shoreline while enhancing community access to our incredible natural assets. This council's dedication to cleaning up our community can at times mean moving forward on major projects that are critical to all of our community and to our environment. However, advancing these necessary projects is not at all feasible without the support of outside funding. Minister, on behalf of all members of this Cobourg Council, I am incredibly grateful that you and your ministry, the Housing of Infrastructure and Communities, for this landmark investment. Cobourg's harbour is as important to our local sense of identity as it is to our economic strength. The disaster mitigation and adaptation funding is essential for sustaining this jewel in our community, shifting some of the financial tax burden away from the local tax base, while also supporting the economic strength and the strategic development of our town, our province, and our country. Your support, Minister, through this critical infrastructure investment will be instrumental in safeguarding our local economy and ensuring continued prosperity and the safety of our community. Thank you for being here today, Minister, and thank you all for joining us.
And just real quick, thank you. And you should know, I mean, this is an incredible contribution from the municipality, right? You're talking a $21 million project, $60 million is coming in from Cobourg here, and folks here are really stepping up to make it happen. And we're coming in with $5 million to make sure that it's not all landing on the tax base here in Cobourg, and we're helping to do our part in partnership.
With any project like this, there's certainly a number of steps for us to take. One of them that is incredibly important is ensuring that we're doing due consultation, ensuring that, for example, we're working within our Indigenous partners to ensure that they're very well aware, they are in support. We are going through the processes, for example, with archaeological exploration. So that will happen first, then we will move forward into the construction phases. As we know, a very precious habitat, so we need to be very mindful as well of things like spawning seasons, bird seasons, things of that nature. So a bit of a long answer to say that this will take place over a number of years, but it will be done to ensure that at every step we are consulting with all of the appropriate authorities, and the end product is absolutely where it needs to be, and that all things have been considered. So thanks for that question.
As to the scale of this project, it's certainly a team effort. I can help share some information today, but certainly not doing this alone. Overall, today we're talking about two major pieces of infrastructure, the harbour itself and Monk's Cove. Both of those are at different stages of development. The harbour design for the breakwaters and the sheet piles, so the metal walls that kind of keep the lake away from the shore, that design is complete. It was tendered in 2022. It came in over budget. The next priority was to find partners and additional funding. So that design work is still complete, and we can move forward with that following the consultation phase that the CEO explained. Monk's Cove has a couple concept designs done, so we fleshed out some of the early possibilities of what that work could entail. Overall, it is reconstructing a stone wall, somewhat similar to what's there now, but at a more flatter slope. But some of the detailed engineering still has yet to be done. Also, Indigenous consultation and some engagement with the neighborhood as well.
No, as we've sort of spoken to, it is a process that's going to take several years. Any kind of impact that it's going to have on the marine community would, of course, be put public well in advance. But no, from my perspective and from what I've heard, this will not be impacting this summer's marina usage.
So this is the ongoing conversation. I had a meeting in Winnipeg last week with housing ministers across the country, and this was a focus of the conversation, is identifying the challenges, especially around home construction, and as we want to drive down the costs of home building, the tariffs and the uncertainty and the challenges to our dollar, and there are all sorts of reasons that we're going to see cost increases potentially. And part of the answer will come from the Bank of Canada, and they're looking at rates, obviously. The other part of this is on the fiscal side of things. It's in our hands. It's going to. I don't think we're going to see a COVID response. What you're going to see is a more targeted where are we able to get shovels in the ground to make sure there's job creation, and where are there projects where the math doesn't pencil anymore, and we want to make sure those projects continue, identifying those projects. I, in addition to engaging with the housing ministers across the country, also sat down with the big city mayors in Ottawa and had the same conversation where there are challenges to their capital plans. We're not going to see it overnight, obviously, but as those challenges arise, how do we work together in partnership? And I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation, but just how we can best do it, because you don't want to just see stimulus for the sake of stimulus. You want to see stimulus that in the short term drives jobs, but in the long term drives sustainability and the kind of communities we all want to live in. And so I think that's more of the response you're going to continue to see. This is a pretty good example of it. This morning I was in the East End. I was in Scarborough making an announcement. It was $7 million for a skills training center, because we know if we're going to really build as much as we can in the short but also medium term, we need to rely on an expanded skilled trades. So there's a lot more to be done. You're going to see more announcements in the coming weeks, but this is a longer conversation than that, and you're going to see a new leader of the Liberal Party on March 9th, a new Prime Minister, and you're going to see, I think, a concerted effort to make sure we're driving infrastructure building and home building, and we're really making that a core priority to create jobs, respond to tariffs. But as I said, make sure that when we are responding with our best foot forward, it's not just about looking at what the other guy's doing, it's also about building us up, building up the Canadian economy as much as we can.
Very briefly at a high level, the reason we're here today is actually to do with the group we're talking about, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Initiative. It was through being a member of that group that actually opened up the opportunity to advocate to various Liberal and Conservative MPs at various events on behalf of Cobourg and on behalf of that agency. It was through that organization I met Vince Badaway, who's been a big supporter of the Great Lakes as well as shoreline protection, who actually sort of introduced me to the next set of conversations that has sort of led us to this day today. And so in terms of going down to Washington, it's an honor to be chosen to go down with members like Andrea Horvath of Hamilton and Mayor Plante of Montreal. But what I hope to bring is advocacy on behalf of that agency as well as all Canadians. As we move forward in a spirit of collaboration, I believe it is of vital importance from every elected level, be it municipally, provincially or federally, to engage in what is potentially the greatest threat to Canada in my lifetime, if not going back to 1812. And I think that as elected leaders, we need to look at all tools available to us and work to avoid a worsening of the situation.